Alright guys, we have the next tier list and we're going to be covering the casters over here. And just so you guys know, let me inform some newer viewers that maybe didn't watch the other ones, which first and foremost, go watch the other videos. I made a whole playlist for them. But if you don't know, we're ranking these units as they were at the end of 2023 over on the NA version of the game. So, if Sanzo got a buff tomorrow, that does not apply to this tier list. And, someone like Budget just came out over on NA for Valentine's Day. When we do the extra class tier list, she's not going to be a part of that because she wasn't out at the end of 2023, just because I like to compare my tier list from the year before and see, well, how things have changed with people getting buffs, new units coming out, all that good stuff. Now, Caster is a little bit weird because it's very notorious for having all of the broken support type units in the game. They've started to branch off a little bit with that now, with people like Reigns, Koyanskaya, Proto Merlin, who's going to come out for summer. They are starting to branch out a little bit on what classes can be supports, which I really like, but Caster for the longest time was a support class, and that's kind of why I shoved the better supports that I would consider up here into the support part of the tier list, just because you don't really rank them the same as you would say rank Medea or Nitocris or Ilya or Sanzo. They don't really perform the same task. Now, there are other supports down here like Caskill that I don't think hit the same highs as some of the high-end supports over here, and so we'll actually kind of rank them appropriately, and they also can be used as, say, AoEs, right? That's why you'll see, Caskill down here, or Miyu down here as well, or even Helena, because they have other roles that they can do, which, for better or worse, means that they're going to be kind of in the proper part of the tier list. But this is kind of the order that I would put them if you were to press me and be like, okay, so the main supports for casters, how would you kind of rank them? It's like, well, Castoria is obviously not only the best support, but she's like the best unit in the game. If you get Scotty, she still allows you to do quick looping. She still allows you to blitz through challenge quests with a very strong single target or AoE quick units, whatever the challenge quest needs. Merlin is still ridiculously good. The fact that there are people that think he needs a buff, I think is absolutely ludicrous. I have been using Merlin more and more now. I stopped using him for a fat minute there, just doing things with a double Castoria and just kind of breezing through things. But I've started bringing, Castoria Merlin to challenge quest nows, and it just makes it's so free. It feels like the most free W you've ever gotten. People might say that Merlin needs to get a buff because he's probably going to get replaced by Proto Merlin in those team comps, because instead of giving the Buster buff, she gives the Arts buff, and some of her skills are a bit more power crept over Merlin. For some reason, they have the same charisma, but Proto Merlin just also overcharges your NP, and she can also just fire her NP on turn 1. It's a little bit ridiculous to say the least, but he's still very, very good. If they gave him a buff, he would probably become dummy nutty broken again, and he's already dummy nutty broken as is. Waver is still pretty much the best free-to-play support you can get. I love that you finish for Yuki and you have the opportunity to get Waver. Some people will be like, well, you could go for a Servant you want, you could go for Mordred or Artoria, but like, you can potentially get any one of those guys on any random banner, but securing and guaranteeing yourself a Waver is just so strong. Being able to not only have 50% for one ally, but 20% for the other two allies that aren't getting the crit damage buff is absolutely huge. It's just like putting good oil in your car's engine. It just makes things, run real smooth. And all of his buffs are super generic in that any team really wants them. Anybody would love to get attack buffs, defensive buffs, damage cut, crit damage. Again, the 50% NP. His NP, very, very strong. Reduces charge, lowers the enemy's defense, so you do more damage. He has the curse if you need that damage over time, or if you want to use, I forget what the CE is called, but like the new CE that just dropped that gives you a power mod on curse damage, or you want to use someone like Jacques de Molay who can profit off of that, but it's a bit more generic now because of that Jacques de Molay CE that we got. And then, also having a chance to stun each individual enemy can be very helpful. I do call him a fraud sometimes because he does not stun all the time, but when he does get those stuns, it's very, very clutch. Miss Crane, I would say as a unit, I probably like more than Waver, but because she takes, I don't want to say like more big brain to use, but you do actually have to consider your team placement and your team order, which normally is not something you have to do. The fact that you have to do stuff like that can make her a little bit more, not wonky to use, but more difficult for especially new players to use. Definitely not as easily accessible as just bring Waver, pop the skills, turn your brain off, right? You actually kind of do need to think a little bit. But if you do use Miss Crane, she could probably rise to being a bit better than Waver. I think if you could start using her a bit better, then she does rise a little bit. Tamamo, unfortunately, is in a very bad position as a support, because right now, what FGO wants you to be doing with your supports is have some way to give you immediate NP on your skills. And now her NP does it. It gives you 20%, if not more, on the overcharge, which is crazy. It's also lowering your skill cooldown, it's healing you. I still think Tamam was very, very nice. I think she's a very strong servant. It's just she is missing an immediate access to either her own NP or, you know, being able to give NP to one of the people in your party. I think if they want to upgrade something like Fox's Wedding to also be, say, like a targetable 30% battery, you will see a significant uptick in people using Tamamo over here, because it's just a matter of fact that you want to have people that give you immediate access to your NP, especially even in boss fights where she's a bit better, because you want to start firing your NP as these bosses are getting a lot stronger. You kind of don't want to be sitting in those fights for very long periods of time. Now, Hans, I think, is not as good as like any of these other supports, but I still think he's very solid. You know, as Baby's first support, he's not bad. I mean, he has the 50% battery, which, to be fair, is something that I think he has over Tamamo, because it helps him get to his NP, and his NP just gives you generic good stuff, you know, attack, defense, heals. You know, what more is there to want? He gives you a solid crit damage buff. He's just a very solid servant overall. They did give him a recent buff over on JP, which I did not really like, because it just seems like they took a lot of effects and threw them at the wall. But technically it does help him support kind of everybody because it's alignment based, but you know, I think it's a little bit wonky. But I still think if you're like a newer player and maybe you didn't pick Waver for some reason, you went and picked well, I don't know, you picked Achilles or something, I don't know, some random other person. Hans is very, very good as like Baby's first support. But now we can start moving into the actual real units over here. Now, Medea is going to sound a little bit weird, but I do want to have her in that solid B tier, because I still find myself consistently having uses for Medea. Very bad damage scaling aside, if you don't know, her damage scaling on her NP is really strange. She's a single target arts unit, but she has what, like AoE arts unit, you know, damage scaling. It's super weird. It's almost as if they thought when she came out initially that if she had normal single target scaling, she'd be a little broken, which I've done some of the calcs before. She would be really good if they fixed her scaling, because her damage would be really respectable. But I think nowadays, it's not like, oh, she'd be so broken that she invalidates all the other single targets. It's like, no, it would just be a nice little thing to give Medea so she'd be a bit better. Because right now, what you primarily are using Medea for is kind of as like, say, a debuff cleanser. It's like some challenge quest. You can kind of donate a little bit of NP gain to somebody, but primarily you're using her in like 90 plus or plus content, because you need her with that massive like 180% battery to just chunk an enemy with any CE that you have equipped. So, you know, if you're going into any event, you know, you have to give her, say, the bronze CE for some reason that doesn't give you any starting charge. Well, that's fine with Medea, because no matter what CE she has, she can easily get to 100% and fire her NP. It's just, if they buffed her damage a little bit, I think she'd be a little more usable. But, you know, in these setups, you know, you could typically give her like the attack buff from Castoria. I've done some setups where I was able to give her the arts buff from Castoria because the other unit I was using, the AoE, you know, already had power mod on the enemy and they were like a buster or quick or something. And so they didn't really need the arts buff. So sometimes you can kind of get around it, but you know, I do think Medea is still pretty worth using. I think she does definitely still have a role. Unfortunately, she's kind of relegated into that like 90 plus farming stuff, but you know, it's nice to have her for those. You know, that's not bad to have that as your niche. Giles is not super great. I really can't see a reason for why you'd want to use Giles. I mean, back in the day, the whole bit was, well, he has one of the quickest NPs in the game, so if you're going to do 100,000 runs on an event, Giles is really good because it's very quick. He's kind of like original Paul Bunyan, but I think they updated his NP animation so he doesn't even have that like funny niche little interaction for super whale players. But yeah, I don't know, just Giles is not super great. He's gonna need a little bit more to get him fixed. I do think Shakespeare has somewhat of a niche for newer players, being able to give like a decent buster buff and 20% NP. Also, I believe his NP, the King's Men one, I think that can stun as well on an AoE, so it has like some usability. I could see a newer player maybe using Shakespeare. If you don't like have, you know, Merlin or Koyenskaya, Oberon, like none of the crazy nut supports, you know, you could bring him as like a plug suit. You know, 20% NP buster buff's not terrible, so it's fine, I suppose. Just like Giles, I have no idea why you'd even try to use Mephistopheles. I mean, they're trying, they're giving him like terror buffs and everything, but my bro does not do any damage. He just ain't doing anything. I tried to bring him to the recent tower event, and I was like, okay, Mephistopheles, you could take out this 30k HP enemy over here. And he's like, nope, wallahi, I'm finished. I can't even do that. I was like, dude, come on, man. Come on, bro. Like, you gotta be doing better than that. I do actually want to kind of spotlight my boy Mozart over here. I do think there still is somewhat of a use for him for your newer players. Obviously, older players, you're probably just going to start bringing stuff like double Castoria Merlin, double Koyenskaya plus Oberon. You're probably not going to rely on somebody like this, but if you're more free-to-play leaning, or you're just starting out, or you got like kind of a mid-range account, there's something still kind of good about Mozart being able to bomb 50 stars and give you a decent arts buff. And the fact that he's a, what is he, a 1-2 star? I forget sometimes, but he's a low rarity unit regardless. He's bronze. That means he doesn't have a whole lot of HP, so it's also not hard for him to kind of just get off the field as well. Or you could just plug suit him to the back if you really don't care and replace him with, say, your waiver or something, right? So that way, even though he's still technically there, he's all the way in the back, so you're probably not going to see him again. The fact is that you can just kind of start immediately critting and whatnot is kind of nice. Like, it's not actually all that bad. And then the arts buff is decent enough as well that I think if you're a newer player, you can find some use for Mozart. Unfortunately, most players, especially this year, are not going to find a use for Mozart because, you know, all of the big bad supports are going to be coming back, except for Miss Crane. I don't think you're coming back, but I think everybody else gets a rate up. Coup Caster is real nasty. He's pretty good. Now, the reason I don't want to put him in EX because he can do Black Grail farming, which is insane. The only gripe I have with him, and it's not even really his fault with his kit, it's just the fact that he's a story-locked unit, so it's very hard to consistently get higher NP copies of him. And as you guys may or may not know, the gacha servants, or the story-locked servants, are limited story-locked. I consider them at NP1 when I do these videos, and the free-to-plays, I kind of look at NP5, because you're pretty much guaranteed to get an NP5 Medea, right? Unless you just never summon at all ever. I guess you never will, but Friend Point Gacha is free. You know, you'll eventually get Medeas if you do enough pulls, but you'll never guarantee that you're going to get more than one Coup Caster over here, right? And so, because of that, there's still a lot of people that don't have this guy at higher NP copies, because he comes back on very random banners, right? I think there was one good banner for Lost Belt 6 that had him. I think it was the initial Morgan, Bargist, and Sith banner that had him on there, and that's kind of why I was like, oh, if you don't want to wait for the second banner, you could try to snag extra copies over here. And that's the only gripe I have about him, because at NP1, he could struggle a little bit. It's still good that he can Black Grail farm, because it does kind of subvert and kind of help out the NP1 damage issue. But if you do have him at NP5, he might feel like an EX tier unit. Like, he might feel way, way better than if you have him at NP1. But so that's kind of the discrepancy there. Caster Liz, I mean, like, you could use her as like an NP5 wave clear. They gave her the battery, so you could use her for that. But I don't know what you guys, I don't know, man. Like, it's Castle. She's not super great, but I guess she has the battery. She's free NP5. It does better damage than them, I guess. So it keeps her at a D tier. Sure, I suppose. It's Castle. What do you want from me? Medea Lily. Medea Lily's really hard to rank because she's super niche. You know what? Let me just make like a let me make a specific tier for like the healer people. Let me just put them under supports. You get up there. There you go. Let's make like a healer one, because healers are also very weird. And like specifically for her and Iris Veal, because healers are something that are not entirely needed or wanted in FGO, but when you do need or want them, they can be very nice. You know, the fact that she can give the party a whole guts is like pretty neat, and then, you know, you're pretty much never gonna die outside of getting one shot if Medea Lily's on the team, but it's just not something that you're really gonna waste a slot on. But I feel really bad putting them in like C or D tier, because FGO is just not super conducive to having, you know, dedicated healers. And I mean, they are trying to help out both of these units. I mean, Iris Veal herself just got a 50% battery to further help her get to her NP, and I believe she also does the Tamamo thing, where she now also buffs the party's NP damage, so she's becoming a little bit more of an offensive support. So I think in time, if that healing gimmick that they have becomes more of like the side niche on top of them being pseudo-normal supports, like we're kind of seeing with Iris Veal, they might rise up to a more respectable level. But I think the end goal is what you want. You want to get them to be Asclepius, because he's not going into healer tier, because Asclepius is kind of like them, but he's not so far in on healing that it's the only thing you want to bring him for. Asclepius, you know, not only heals, he removes your debuffs, but he also has debuffs to cover the enemy. He gives you a battery, he gives you NP gain. He just is more of a general support that also happens to be really good at healing. And, you know, anybody that has Asclepius knows how good this guy is and know how clutch he is when you can bring him to a mission. He's very, very solid. And so I think they're trying to strive to be more like Asclepius, where they're healing, but then they're also trying to move into also doing general support as well. So that's kind of how I would address this whole issue between them, or these two, and him. So yeah. Nursery Rhyme. Nursery Rhyme's not like super great, but she does at least have somewhat of a usage as like a crit caster. If you wanted to bring her to do like decent crit damage, she's also got the battery to kind of help her get to her NP. I mean, she's definitely the definition of usable, and that you can get decent mileage, but you're just gonna have better options than Nursery Rhyme. Okay, but Paracelsus is very hard for me to rank because I really want to put him in EX tier. I really want to put him up here because Paracelsus is kind of like an AoE version of Medea, while also borrowing the good traits of Asclepius over here, because he can donate a Guts to someone, but more importantly, arguably, he can donate a 50% NP gain buff and an arts buff to them, while also having a massive battery himself. So if you need him to do, say, a wave 1 clear, because maybe your main looper's not as good, he can do that, right? There were times that I would have to do that during the Scotty meta, as I've talked about. I didn't have my own Scotty, and so people like Asclepius and Paracelsus were super clutch. You know, if it was a Berserker node or something where, you know, and I don't know if Lancelot's going to be able to do this in 3 turns with only 1 Scotty. Well, I was like, okay, well, Paracelsus can take out the first wave because, you know, they're like 20k guys. His damage isn't crazy, but it's enough to clear wave 1s. On Berserkers and Assassins. And then, you know, Lancelot gets this massive NP gain uptick, and so he's able to loop his NP back for wave 2 and then use it for wave 3. And so for stuff like that, they can be very useful. And I guess if you're a player that already has, you know, you already have Scotty, you already have someone like Castoria, these units might not feel as impactful as they are, but I think you notice how good these units are when you don't have as much. And I think that's when they really shine. And sure, you know, you're a whale player, you might not want to use either one of these guys. You might be like, I don't need them. But what I'm saying is, if you kind of come down into the mud, you kind of come down to the pits, you see how much of a shining beacon these units can actually be. And so I'm putting them in EX just because of how impactful they can be. Like when you finally get to see how impactful they are, you just know how good they are. They're crazy. Babbage is surprisingly good. I've used Babbage here and there. It's kind of become a meme on stream that sometimes we'll use Babbage, but the guy just has a good skill set. He could do decent enough damage. The fact that he can like get around enemy defenses and stuff as well is also pretty useful. I think he's rather solid if you don't have someone like you know, Sansa or an Ilya as like a DPS caster. I think the only weird thing, and let me double check this because I always say he's single target, but I'm pretty sure he's AoE. Like I have to double check this because I always assume he's single target. Yeah, he's AoE. It's the weirdest thing. I'm so gaslit into thinking he's single target because it looks like he's punching one dude, but it turns out it's AoE. That's kind of my only problem with him, but like, it's fine. He's good enough that I think it's whatever. Helena. Helena's a really weird one to talk about because Helena should feel like she has the impact of these two, but for some reason she just doesn't. She just doesn't quite feel like she's up to snuff with them. And I don't know if it's the fact that they just give NP plus NP gain and that's just like good enough. I don't know if that's what it is, but she feels like she should be as impactful as these guys as well because she gives the Omni card buff. She has the, you know, battery for the party. She gen stars, and then she can also, like them, be a wave clear. They're also giving her an additional battery. I believe she has a 50% battery for herself and 20 for the party, and then also getting NP gain to do wave clearing. I don't know. Yeah, but you know what? I'm gonna say that I think Helena is actually like pretty solid. You know, I'm gonna say she's solid. Or actually, maybe the solution is bump everybody down here, bump them down here, and save room for like the other EX like really insane casters. Maybe that's what I should do. Maybe they should be like the A+. I don't know. I'll let people in the comments kind of discuss that one. But I don't feel comfortable, like, if they're up here in EX and like they're these crazy good free-to-play options, I don't feel comfortable with Helena not being next to them because she's so similar. Like, even if they probably see more usage than Helena, I don't think that she's like any less viable than they are, right? Especially with the buffs that she's been getting. I don't feel like she's any less viable. Edison is super strange. Because Edison, I do feel like, is solid, maybe 1 buff away from being really good. I'm going to slap him up into C+ as kind of an acknowledgement that I know that he's not like the most used or the most crazy guy, but he is like really, really close to being there. I just don't know, because he's getting there. His whole gimmick is like, you know, overcharging people's NPs and like, you know, making sure you're getting those overcharged 3, 4, 5s, all that crazy stuff. But he's just missing like a few, maybe 2 buffs max, but I would say they could probably do it in 1 buff that could really make him good. And so it's kind of an acknowledgement of that. I want to slap him in C+, because I know he's not like completely like barely runnable. I know you could get some mileage with him. I've used him a little bit, but it definitely doesn't feel as good as, say, using one of these guys as your free-to-play support, or I guess quote-unquote free-to-play support. Please just make his buffs like targetable, or maybe like the quick buff gives him crit damage, the Buster buff gives him NP damage, the arts buff gives him a battery or something. Just tack on an extra effect to each of his skills. Please, Geronimo is crying for a buff out here. Please give him something. All right, we have our first EX tier unit. Okay, yeah. Now that we're making over to these guys, I can definitely agree. I think I like these guys more in A tier. Might have jumped the gun a little bit on putting them in EX, but they are very, very impactful. But Sanzo is very crazy. With the Sanzo Charisma on the 3rd skill being able to give you debuff, immunity, NP gain, the fact she's got an 80% battery, they gave her more damage to just chunk really big dudes. She can taunt herself. She's just a very, very nice unit to have. I think I'm also going to slap Ilya next to her, because usually, you guys know, I don't like to have 2 of the same type of units that are, you know, both single target Buster casters in EX tier, but they're both just so good, and they're both so good for different reasons. Ilya does a little bit more damage than Sanzo does, but Sanzo has a bit more of a different ceiling going into team comps because of her 80% battery. So say like she's more viable with different CEs, pretty much can be viable with any CE if you want to go for her a pen skill plus the 80% battery. She can auto fire her NP with anything, whereas Ilya can kind of do that with the 50% battery, but obviously not to the same effect, right? Like she's going to need, even with the pen skill and the 50% battery, 30% starting charge, which not every event CE has, or someone like a cast warrior to give her 30%. But I still think they're very crazy in their own ways, and they're both very good into farming content and into challenge quest nodes. They're very, very strong in their own rights. Dude, Nitocris is so hard to rank. Dude, Nitocris is so... casters are so weird, man. I'm gonna slap her in A+, because I don't think we could fill out EX with too many people, but I do acknowledge that Nitocris is so crazy. Like, even as you start to get a more built-up account, you'll probably still use Nitocris, because go figure, like a massive over 100% battery, plus having a gimmick of being able to really overkill bronze and silver enemies rather consistently does actually mean something, right? Especially going into like 90++ content. You could actually kind of abuse people like Nitocris to take out nodes you really shouldn't have any business being able to take out, you know, especially if you happen to have something like Demonic Bodhisattva as well, where you can further increase your overcharge level, or the Amakusa CE, you know, you can use that to even further buffer insta-kill, you know, maybe even sneak a gold insta-kill there, here and there. Like, Nitocris is very, very strong. Depending on how things go, I might bump her into EX, because I really do like Nitocris, but I want to be a little bit more reserved. Da Vinci's getting there. Da Vinci's getting there. I think we're still missing 2 of her buffs. We're missing the most recent one on JP, and I think there's one more before. No, we have the arts buff one, I think. I think we're missing just the most recent one. I think once Da Vinci finally gets the most recent buff, I would probably slap her in like AA+, but we're still kind of missing a little bit, but she is getting there. I mean, she's definitely a very, very solid unit. You know, I might even just bump her up into A, because she's still like 50% battery. You got the Pierce Invul and everything. The only problem with her is that really she only has 1 hit on an AoE arts NP, so her refund can be a little bad. I'm going to stick with the B ranking, just because I'm like, yeah, but next year I'll be able to like kind of give her dues, you know, when we start getting a lot of these other buffs that she's, you know, due to get really soon. As once we get those, I think I'll start to bump her up. But I was like, right now, I think she's just definitely a very solid-ish unit. Dude, Marie, just... I'm not even trying to cope and try to put her in C tier. I'm not even going to try to cope with that one. I just not even bother. Caskill. Caskill still has, like, a use. You could still bring him to stages. It doesn't feel great until he gets his buff that gives, like, the party the battery and gives himself the battery. But if you are fortunate enough to have, like, really strong starting charge CEs, like K-Scope and stuff, and you can kind of auto-fire his NP, it's an immediate star bomb that gives everybody defense, crit damage. plus it's just massively gassing up the entire party's crit star gen, giving them a decent enough attack buff, you know, the 21% Gilgamesh charisma, while also giving them like the arts buff, and I believe it's debuff success rate, which is a little more gimmicky, but, you know, hey, if you've got somebody like Yang who really needs to stick those fire debuffs, you know, that can be very good in really ensuring that their damage is going to land. I think Casco is still very solid, but then he just jumps up to like A+ as soon as they give him the battery, because go figure, being able to get to your NP that technically supports the party and also gives everybody battery would make you a lot better. Solomon over here. I don't, just ignore Solomon, bro. I don't know what bro thinks he's doing over here. Scheherazade. Where's Murasaki? Because I kind of view both of these two in kind of the same light, as they're just kind of good, strong units. You can use them both in your farming comps if you need to have like an arts AoE looper. You can use them for both. Murasaki, I like that she is able to kind of donate the demonic power mod to people. I think that's very strong, while also having an insane demonic power mod herself. And then also kind of having different debuffs to help her manage the fight. Giving the party defense also makes everybody rather tanky. Seeing as she is an arts unit, bringing her with, say, like your Castoria Merlin or double Castoria Tamamo, giving them a little bit of that extra tanky factor, I think is very, very nice. And then that's kind of the same thing you get with, dude, I keep wanting to call her like Nightless Caster, because I'm pretty sure that's what it was on the reveal. Scheherazade. I keep wanting to call her because I'm pretty sure that's the name they gave her when they announced 1.5. That's what I still just know her as. But Scheherazade, kind of the inverse of that, being anti-king is really niche, but it's really good when you do get it. And then being able to give the entire party a guts, I just think is very good. Like, it's kind of like the gimmick that Irisfield has, but on a skill, so you just get that immediately, right? You just have immediate access to it. Now, in comparison to both of them, I'm going to put Anastasia more in B. No. You stay down there, buddy. I'm going to put her in a B+, just because I think you can make the argument that Anastasia could reach up there, but I think she's just a little bit more limited, which sucks because I like Anastasia a lot. I mean, I think her charisma is very cool in being able to buff the party and debuff the enemy. Having a 50% battery plus Pierce Invul is always going to be good. It's just, she's kind of missing things, and it looks like she's going to be missing out on a little bit in the future, because we already know the next buff she's going to be getting for the 8th anniversary, I believe it was. And it was not a bad buff, but it kind of misses the mark a little bit. And so, you know, I think with Murasaki and Scheherazade having the duality of being really good in challenge quests, but also having the opportunity to be farmers, whereas Anastasia can also do both, but not quite as well, I would say, because her NP gain, like in her looping, is a little problematic. But she can still, like, if you really want to work for it, you can get her in there. I think I'd probably put her in that B+, because she definitely does it a bit better than, say, Da Vinci does. But one hit AoE NP, like, what do you want Da Vinci to do? Like, there's nothing she can't do. Castaneer is really good. Castaneer is just like the Buster version of both of them, just maybe a little bit less viability in challenge quests. But no, she's still able to, like, donate the guts and everything, and she still gets the massive attack buff. Now, I personally have, I don't want to, how do I word this? Caster Nero is someone that I already thought was really good, you know, rocking the 50% battery, being good into Buster farming, you know, being able to loop her skills is always nice. But since I got her at NP2, I've noticed a significant increase in how good the unit is, but I don't know, I'm pretty sure that actually might make her worse on the tier list ranking, because that means that realistically she probably is like right here, but to me she feels like an A tier unit because I got her to NP2, but she might actually be closer to here, because I do think she can have some issues with her damage at times, and I'm trying to go against my bias of having her at NP2, so I'm going to secure her in that B+, because look, you guys know, Fate rankings lore-wise, if they're B+, they could be an A tier. It's just that's more like an in-between thing. So just to kind of curb my bias a little bit, to make sure I'm not giving into it too much, I'm going to slap her in B+, even though she feels like an A tier to me. Cersei's kind of just like Buster Medea. Technically has a better kit, I suppose, because, you know, she stuns and everything on her NP, but realistically, she's just getting used as Buster Medea, which is kind of unfortunate. You know, toss Cersei a buff or something, give her a little bit more of a usage outside of just being, okay, fire big NP, chunk one guy in like 90+ content, and then call it a day. Like, let's maybe toss her something else. I feel really bad for Queen of Sheba, because she just kind of feels like nursery rhyme to me, where they're supposed to be like crit casters, but they don't really do a great job at being crit casters, which, to be fair, I don't know if you've seen, there's not a whole lot of crit casters on here. They might have just kind of given up on that whole idea because they don't have crit damage. You don't crit. These guys don't crit. Like, they don't crit over here. You know, it's like maybe they kind of just gave up on the whole idea of crit casters in general because maybe they're just not super great. Avisa Braun's a very solid free-to-play option. He as like a free-to-play looper, he's definitely like not as good as like Caster Coup over here, so I'll bump him a tier down, but he's still very good. If you can't get your grubby little mitts on like an NP3 or higher Caster Coup, then Avisa Braun is definitely worth the investment. I also like that if you bring him to more CQ-oriented content, he has a purpose. If he goes down, like he buffs your allies if he happens to go down, which I think is just something that's it's not like the most crazy thing in the world, but it is nice that he does it. Okay, Siege is kind of crazy. Like, not only is he a free NP5, this is like the best arts of looping caster we have. This bro is an absolute maniac when it comes. Well, you might have a little bit of competition, but you know, they're both going in that EX tier anyway. I mean, he does it by hard looping. Chen Gong uses bullets. So, you know, which might be technically cheating, but I mean, do you really care if he's cheating when he has like the Arash overcharge thing going on where he just does free damage for no reason? I don't really think we really care. Shooten Caster, just another like kind of mid unit that if you want to use them, you can get some value out of them. She's an NP5, so she can do decent enough damage, but really outside of that, I don't think she's anything super special. Miyu is definitely very interesting to rank. Because something I wish about Miyu is I wish that they would make the first and second skill more targetable. Because the third skill is targetable, so it seems like they kind of want her to be a support, especially after they fix the NP. But I think they need to kind of decide what they want to do with Miyu first. Like, she's solid enough. I think B tier, you know, B tier obviously is just like, they're like a decent enough unit. They probably have better options, but they're decent units. But I think they need to decide if they want Miyu to kind of be like a Super Orion, like a self-buffer where you want to use her to do damage, or if they want to start focusing and gearing her more towards being a buffer for other people, right? Or maybe have her be either or, like make things targetable to at least give her the options. Because I think you would see more use for Miyu if she did have those. Like, because she gives battery, she gives an arts buff, she gives crits damage, and then she could give like a guts plus the debuff immunity, and then, you know, healing on the NP. She could be a really good free-to-play, you know, art support type unit that I think would be used a lot more if they would kind of just decide on where they want to stick her. Caster Corday, I like Caster Corday quite a bit. But no, I'm not being biased. She's good. She's good. Nah. Caster Corday's good. Nah, she'd win. She's good. I like Caster Corday a lot. Having, what is it, the 60% battery, plus being able to pretty much have, say, the comma gimmick where, you know, you could slap your damage mod on anybody, because if they're skill sealed, she gets the power mod on them. But the good thing for, you know, that as opposed to, I guess if we're using Summer Comma, is that not a whole lot of servants say charm, but skill seal is not super uncommon, you know, and I wouldn't doubt that we get like a mystic code or something that would let us put skill seal on people, which might extend how good she could be going into other fights. I also, and this is not a plus or minus for her, this is just something that I think is funny, I do think it's kind of hilarious that her and Summer Anastasia, despite having like kind of a rivalry in the story for, what was it, Summer 6, they both complement each other very well. I think it's funny, but she's very good if you want to bring her to CQ content. I use her all the time over on JP, or if you need her to chunk a really big enemy, she kind of has that whole Medea effect, just a bit better damage-wise, but obviously Medea is going to be the king with like the 180% battery, but usually the 60% is going to be good enough. Like you're probably going to be fine, you know, with something like a 60% battery. And also being able to just not make it a 60%, but you could have it be a 30% for you and a 30% for somebody else, because she can donate the other half of the battery as well, which is very, very useful. Dude, Izumo's just like the quick version of these guys. She's really crazy. I mean, I was doing so much propaganda for Izumo when she was coming out. She's good. Like, what do you want from me? Like, they slapped the 50% battery on her. She's got like 3 different gimmicks that overlap into each other. She's just good. She's a solid server. And finally, we have the support Martha, who I do like. Let me double check. I have to double check. I got to make sure that the triple power mod she gives is on her NP, right? Let me double check this just to make sure I'm not waffling. Yeah. She gives you the triple power mod. Yeah, like, you know what? Call me a crazy person, call me insane, but I'm bopping her up there. Because I'm like, no, how often have I used, you know, the Santa Martha as like a support type unit? I'm like, quite frequently on JP. She's just like really fun to bring into challenge quests. Because if anybody is one of these three, you know, like the Summer Martha power mods that she has, if they're any of these three, you could just kind of bring her. And then now you just have power mod on them for no reason. While also just giving you a ton of good effects. The weakest part, I think, is that it is a quick NP. I think that's the worst part about Santa Martha over here. But you can kind of get around that, right? It's fine. You know, you bring like Santa Martha plus Castoria, which is what I have to do on JP because I don't have Ruler Scotty or anybody like that. You just bring them. You know, you can give a little bit of NP over to Martha because, you know, she gives, what, 20% to the party? No, she gives it to herself. No, that's the third skill. Yeah, there you go. It's 30% to herself. I was like, I knew she gave herself her own battery, but she gives herself 30%. Castoria gives her 30%. She's already at 60. You have a starting charge CE. Bada boom, bada bing. You got power mod. So I think she's really solid. Probably easier to use than one of these three. Or probably, I guess, more viable than these two and maybe easier to use than that. But yeah, that's going to be the caster one. Caster's a little bit weird because we have a lot of supports. We have healers. And then we have just a bunch of weird characters down here that are just super strange. So I'm going to be excited to get some feedback on this one. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I will, again, of course, put the tier list in the description if you want to make your own and go into the Discord and drop your own tier list. But casters are strange, man. They're just a very weird class. And then next we have assassins, which, oh, dude, I can't wait to talk about the mid class, but we'll do that next time. And I'll catch y'all in the next video. Peace.